You make me laugh.
I don't know why.
Pat, you may find this hard to believe, but there was a time in my career when my kids were small and there were a bunch of conflicts in life and everything. I actually didn't fly for a while, and I became what is known in the vernacular now as a rusty pilot. Has that ever happened to you, or have you flown every day since you were 12?
Well, since I was 14, but no, it has. I was a rusty pilot as well for about 7 or 8 years, maybe 9, for exactly the same reasons. We had moved into we'd moved to a different state. My daughter was 2. I was in a new job. We had a fresh mortgage, a couple of car payments. I mean, you name it.
No
I felt
pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Felt right and tried to stay current as best as I possibly could. Remember, I said current, not proficient.
Mhm.
Tried to stay current as best I could. And at some point, it's just I realized I hadn't flown for some months, and before long, it was some years. And yeah, it's happened to me too. It's happened to a lot of folks.
Well, it is such a common thing. And the thing that I really remember most about it was when I got to the part where I could get back into flying, the process of doing it was not crystal clear. And even when you talk to a flight school or a CFI and you're like, hey, I am a commercial pilot and I have my CFI, but I haven't flown in X number of years. I need to get up to speed. And, some of them weren't clear on it. Thank goodness AOPA, in its great wisdom, developed this program called the Rusty Pilot Initiative.
Yes,
And
they
there's
did.
live seminars, there's online seminars. If I'm not mistaken, there was a guy from Texas who was involved in writing that course. Do you remember that guy's name? Pat Brown?
Well, let me put this into perspective. I was having dinner one night in Houston with the then president of AOPA. He was Mark Baker's predecessor, and a few other AOPA folks and some folks from West Houston Airport. There was a small gathering at dinner one night. And I was talking to the guy from AOPA sitting across the table from me. And we were talking about the attrition in the pilot ranks and how AOPA could turn that around. And there was a small flight school somewhere in the Northeast, and I can't for the life of me remember the name of the flight school, that had developed a Saturday course aimed at getting people back into the seat, to the left seat. And I don't recall if they called it Rusty Pilot or not. Um, and I thought, man, that would. In fact, I said to the gentleman across the table from me, that would be a really good idea for AOPA to get into something like that, and because they were the ones, they were aware of this particular program. Anyway, time passes. I get a phone call from AOPA saying, "Would you like to write a Rusty Pilot seminar?" And I thought, wow, that could be fun. And so and the folks that I was talking to are no longer at AOPA, but they said, well, look, choose one of your fellow seminar presenters, because at the time I was doing a bunch of ASI, Air Safety Institute seminars that we did all over the country. And they said, pick another one of your colleagues there, and the two of you put your head together and write a Rusty Pilot seminar. So I called Mark Grady over in South Carolina. Mark is a great guy, funny as a crutch, and also has some a media background, a television reporter and things like that, and a writer and such. So I thought that would be really good for for our skill sets that kind of meshed. And together, we wrote the original Rusty Pilot seminar that we tested for, I don't know, about probably about a year around the country, debuting the first one at an AOPA fly-in about 8 years ago. And, and it looked like it might have some legs. So over time, Chris Moser at AOPA took the bones that Mark and I had written and kind of fleshed it out and kind of made it look a little bit, well, significantly more professional, and incorporated some scenarios and things like that, and that really is what we're presenting today. with various updates and things like that, but largely unchanged from the second version of the AOPA thing that Chris updated from Mark and I's original presentation. And I think today, at least as of this taping, we're at something like, what is it? Is it 12 or 15,000 Rusty pilots? I mean, it's a
Coming up on
significant,
15,000.
yeah, Rusty pilots that program has gotten back in the air, and so combined with basic med, the AOPA has made a significant difference in the flying landscape out there, and I have to tell you, I'm kind of proud to be a part of that.
Oh, you absolutely should be. I saw Mark Grady present a Rusty Pilot, first one I'd ever seen, 10 years ago at St. Simon's Island, Georgia. There was an AOPA event there.
Wow.
It was the first AOPA event I had been to on the East Coast. I'd been to the last of the really big national gatherings they
Right.
held in Dallas or Fort Worth,
Right.
but it was terrific. And I mean, the thing that people don't get about Rusty Pilot, Pat, it's the ground portion of a flight review. And it doesn't matter if you haven't flown in 3 weeks or 30 years. It's about 3 hours of really intensive ground school stuff with visuals and a flight instructor going through the process. It's funny, it's engaging, it's got great information. It really gives a good overview. And we tend to do them in conjunction with flight clubs or flight schools. So for those people who are really motivated and from the local area, you can just sign up and start flying. I've actually done a Rusty Pilot in Kissimmee, Florida, where before I had packed up my gear, the first person was in the air. They're so beneficial. They're worthwhile. And probably like you, have had a number of people come to several because they find it really valuable. They get to ask questions, and you're in a room full of other people. Might be 25 people, might be
Yeah.
125 people,
Yeah.
but you're not alone. Whatever your situation is, you're not the only one.
Yeah, the one that you saw at St. Simon's all those years ago was the original version. That was one of the beta testing sites that was done. I did one about the same time over in San Marcos, and we had about 100 and some odd pilots in the room there. To my incredible surprise, one of them, well, several of them went on to get back in the air, but one of them in particular has become a very, very good friend. He and his wife own a Bonanza at a neighboring airport, and he had not flown for years. Had owned a Seneca, and sold it, and his business got busy and whatnot, and he hadn't flown for years. Decided he was going to get back into it. Now, back when we did that one, he was probably in his late, probably in his mid 60s, and so we've been friends now for 10 years, and he's now in his mid 70s, and he and his wife fly that Bonanza all over the place. And I remember he wrote a letter to AOPA thanking us for getting him back into the left seat, and they have that letter framed at their office in Frederick, Maryland. So when I walked in and saw that, oh, Jamie, nice, all right, I like that. But there have been a lot of stories. I get a lot of emails from people that have taken one of my Rusty pilots. And by the way, shameless plug, I have one coming up October 12th, 2024, at West Houston Airport, India Whiskey Sierra. If anybody happens to be in the Texas area and wants to make a drive or a flight down to Houston, I got one coming up October 12th of 2024. And I think you've got one coming up too, don't you?
I do. I'll be doing one at Sebring Regional Airport, Sebring, Florida, right in the center of the peninsula on October 5th. It's a Saturday. They're always on Saturdays.
Yeah.
But that means y'all can come see Pat and I live in person, not together. We'll be in different places, but we still get out and do these. And I love them, Pat. I mean, I've done them at AirVenture. I've done them at Stun and Fun. I've done them at small flight schools, just like you. I've done large gatherings. It's always interesting. And you know what really got my eye
What's
is
that?
we're probably 5 years into this
Yeah.
and really finding success. And people were so pleased to be there. And I started noticing a certain number of the people at the Rusty Pilot now were airline pilots and corporate pilots, very proficient people who flew in the system, but they haven't flown VFR in years. And they want to teach their kids to fly. They're at a position where they can afford their own airplane. They want to fly with their family. And if a person who is flying regularly for the airlines is coming to a Rusty Pilot, that's the stamp of approval in my book. That's
Yeah.
really good information. It's worth going.
Yeah, and we actually recognizing that there was some of that happening, we've also developed a program called Back to Your Roots. And Back to Your Roots is specifically aimed at airline pilots. And by the time this episode airs, that online webinar, which I'm proud to say I had a little bit of something to do with as well, is should be on AOPA's website. If people do a search for Back to Your Roots, it's in the final stages of being blessed, but by the time this airs, it may well have been. So and Rusty Pilot, back to Rusty, that is available as an online PowerPoint type presentation at Rusty Pilots, plural, rustypilots.org. And at that link, people can look and see where any of the live presentations or where the live webinars might be, because we do still do 4 or 5 live webinars every year as well, in addition to the live in-person type things that we do typically on Saturday mornings.
Well, I'll cap it off saying this, Pat, and feel free to interject with anything you want. I think the Rusty Pilot is not just for Rusty Pilots, and I've always believed that. If you're a student pilot who's getting ready for a check ride and you want to brush up on the things that are going to come up in your oral, Rusty Pilot's good for you. If you've been flying for 25 years, you own your own airplane, and you're getting ready for your flight review, Rusty Pilot is a great resource. It counts for the ground portion, so you can just show your flight instructor the endorsement. We do give you an endorsement label for your logbook. I've done the ground portion. Let's just go fly. If you're an airline pilot, a corporate pilot, you haven't flown VFR in years, Rusty Pilot's good for you. And literally, if you haven't flown in 35 years, but you think you want to get back to it because you sold your business, you retired, you got a couple bucks, and now you're ready to do it, you can get up to speed very quickly using the Rusty Pilot program. It really works. If it was available when I was a Rusty Pilot, I'd have done it. It would have been much easier than the process I went through.
So two caveats. One is that yes, it does count for ground school. Absolutely does. However, remember, the CFI who does the flight review in the air is the one that has to sign you off that you've done the flight review. So if I'm that CFI, even if I'm familiar with the Rusty Pilot program, I'm probably going to want to sit down with you for a few minutes and make sure that you remember all of those things that you're expected to know before we go fly. So Rusty Pilot shouldn't expect to just be able to walk in, show that endorsement, and boom, off they go. There'll be a little bit of ground school. I can almost guarantee you that.
That's a really good point, because just like when you go on a check ride, the oral never really ends.
It never really
Even
ends.
with this, it's in the instructor's best interest and your best interest that they talk to you and figure out how much you really know during the flight. But I will throw one extra thing in because I think it's funny. An endorsement's good for 24 calendar months. So whether that's the ground portion or the flight review. But I have had people ask me at the Rusty Pilot, when I'm giving out the endorsements, how long is this good for? When do I have to go for my check ride? And my thing is usually, well, if you go in 2 or 3 weeks, it's probably going to be a pretty benign oral that they do with you, that, the ground portion before you go fly. If you wait 20 months, you could expect to do the full ground portion.
Oh yeah. Here's a second caveat. Folks, especially those that haven't flown in 25 or 30 years, they're concerned, how long is it going to take me? And some conventional wisdom says 1 hour for every year you've been out. I have personally, as a CFI, I've not found that to be the case. I can't give you a hard number that, you've been out for 30 years. It's going to take you, 13.2 hours to get. I can't give you that kind of a number. But what I have found is that conventional wisdom isn't necessarily true. I will say this. I was actually asked after a Rusty Pilot seminar, a gentleman who, again, has since become a very, very good friend, asked me if I would get him back in the air. And he had just bought a Cessna 182, hadn't flown in 25 years, had 100 hours in his logbook when he quit flying. At this point, he would have been in his 63 or 64 years old. This is several years ago. So here's an older guy, hadn't flown in 25 or 30 years, had 100 hours in his logbook when he quit flying and learned how to fly in Cessna 172, and he had bought a Cessna 182. And so it took us about 25 hours, 26 hours, something like that, to get him comfortable and back in the air. But remember, he was flying a bigger, heavier, faster airplane.
Oh, that he's stepped up to high performance
So he
after a
stepped up to high
decades-long break. That's
Exactly.
impressive.
So it took 25, 26 hours, something like that. I'm convinced, based on the way he flew the airplane, that it wouldn't have taken nearly that long if we'd stayed with the 172. But and by the way, if there's anyone who's kind of rusty watching today, and I hope there is, to give you hope, that same gentleman decided after flying for 3 or 4 years and getting his experience level built up that he wanted to get his instrument rating. So by that time, I was an examiner, and I had the pleasure of doing his instrument check ride, which he passed absolutely stunningly. Not because he was my friend, because when I put the FAA hat on, that goes out the window. But he did a great job, and now he flies that 182 all over the country on an IFR flight plan, and he's 72, 73 years old at this point. So, as long as you're reasonably healthy, there's no reason that you can't get back into the left seat if you aren't already. And age is just a number. It really is.
I love it. Thank you so much, Pat. Folks, take the Rusty Pilot program seriously. You could go look at Rusty Pilots online. Just Google AOPA Rusty Pilots. You can find out where there's one in your area. Go to it. Whatever stage you're at, it's going to be beneficial. And of course, October 5th, I'll be presenting in Sebring, Florida. I'd love to see you. October 12th, Pat will be at West Houston in Houston, Texas. He would be very happy to have you in the audience, especially if you can tell him that you watched this video, clicked the like button, shared the video on social media, left a comment talking about how we've improved your life immeasurably through our just stellar commentary, and of course, subscribe to the channel. You never know. He might let you take a selfie with him. Pat, with all that said, I'll talk to you next time.
Adios, my friend.